Archimedes, a name that reverberates through the chambers of scientific and mathematical history, remains one of the most iconic figures of the ancient world. Born around 287 BCE, in the bustling city of Syracuse, a Greek settlement, on the island of Sicily, he was a man whose brilliance extended across disciplines from geometry and mechanics to hydrostatics and astronomy. His early life is believed to have been one of privilege and education, likely facilitated by his family's noble status. His father, Phidias, was an astronomer, which might have influenced young Archimedes' early exposure to scientific thought, while much of his youth remained speculative due to the passage of time and limited documentation. Archimedes' genius became apparent as he matured and delved deeply into mathematical inquiry and practical engineering. Though there is no definitive evidence of where he received his education, many historians speculate he may have studied in Alexandria, a hub of intellectual activity during the Hellenistic era. This belief is bolstered by accounts of his correspondence with contemporaries from that region, including Conon of Samos and Eratosthenes. Archimedes' works spanned a breathtaking array of subjects, often displaying both an unmatched rigor in mathematical proof and a vivid imagination in solving physical problems. His ability to bridge abstract theory and practical application was unmatched, leading to timeless contributions that still resonate in today's academic and engineering communities. Among his most celebrated contributions is the principle of buoyancy, popularly known as Archimedes' principle. Legend holds that this discovery occurred while he was bathing, noticing the water displacement caused by his body. This insight led him to understand how an object submerged in fluid experiences an upward force equal to the weight of the displaced fluid. So delighted by the realization, he is said to have leaped from the bath and run naked through the streets, exclaiming "Eureka!" Whether myth or reality, the anecdote reflects his intense passion for discovery and illustrates his keen observational skills. Beyond this principle, his treatises on levers and pulleys, including his famous assertion that he could move the earth with a lever long enough and a fulcrum to place it on, highlight his flair for mechanics. Archimedes was also a master of geometric analysis. His work on calculating the areas and volumes of irregular shapes was remarkably advanced for his time. He anticipated integral calculus through methods of exhaustion, approximating the value of pi with remarkable accuracy. His explorations into spirals, spheres, and parabolas not only enriched mathematics but also laid groundwork for later developments by mathematicians centuries after his death. Among his known works are on the sphere and cylinder, measurement of a circle, on spirals, and the quadrature of the parabola. These writings reflect his deep commitment to both theoretical inquiry and logical proof, hallmarks of rigorous mathematical tradition. Yet Archimedes was not merely a scholar confined to parchment and theory. During the Second Punic War, when the Romans besieged Syracuse, he applied his intellectual prowess to the defense of his homeland. Archimedes designed ingenious war machines that flung massive stones, overturned ships, and even used mirrors to allegedly set enemy vessels on fire. While some of these accounts may be exaggerated over time, they underscore the practical impact of his intellect in times of crisis. His devices prolonged the resistance of Syracuse against one of the most powerful armies of antiquity, showcasing his ability to turn scientific understanding into formidable tools of warfare. In addition to his mechanical ingenuity, Archimedes' use of early mathematical proofs demonstrates his status as a pioneer of logical reasoning. He often constructed elaborate arguments to reach conclusions that are now taught in modern classrooms. His work with infinitesimals foreshadowed many aspects of differential and integral calculus, laying the groundwork for thinkers like Newton and Leibniz. Centuries later, his fascination with geometric progression and series exemplifies his deep commitment to understanding patterns in the natural world. By creating logical structures that supported empirical observation, he effectively bridged philosophy and engineering with a precision rarely seen in antiquity. Despite his myriad contributions, the end of Archimedes' life was as tragic as it was emblematic of the tumultuous era in which he lived. After a prolonged siege, the Romans ultimately breached Syracuse in 212 BCE. The Roman general Marcus Claudius Marcellus had reportedly given strict orders that Archimedes be spared due to his immense value. However, fate had other plans. According to historical accounts, a Roman soldier came across the elderly mathematician, deep in thought, drawing geometric figures in the sand. When the soldier ordered him to accompany him, Archimedes refused, saying he needed to finish his work. In a moment of rashness, The soldier killed him, ignoring the orders of his commander. This grim ending serves as a powerful reminder of the fragile boundary between brilliance and brutality, a boundary often blurred in times of war. The loss of Archimedes was mourned even by his enemies. Marcellus is said to have lamented the death of the great thinker, recognizing the immense intellectual loss to humanity. For centuries following his death, Archimedes' influence continued to permeate scientific thought. Many of his works were preserved in Greek and later translated into Latin and Arabic, spreading his ideas across cultures and continents. His impact can be seen in the Renaissance, where scholars rediscovered and revered his contributions. Figures, such as Galileo and Descartes, openly acknowledged their debt to Archimedes, considering him a guiding light in the pursuit of knowledge. Today, Archimedes is celebrated in both scholarly literature and popular imagination. Ancient depictions of him often show a bearded man, hunched over drawings or instruments, a vision of a tireless thinker consumed by inquiry. These portrayals, found in mosaics and sculptures, emphasize his intellectual fervor and ascetic lifestyle. In modern stylizations, he is frequently imagined, surrounded by intricate devices, suspended levers, and mathematical diagrams, sometimes illuminated by the symbolic light of discovery. Whether carved in marble or rendered in digital animations, the essence of Archimedes remains one of relentless curiosity and intellectual adventure. Even the few physical representations from the ancient world that might depict Archimedes carry a kind of reverence, showing a man deeply absorbed in thought. Modern visualizations tend to romanticize him, often emphasizing his eureka moment or his dramatic death, thereby turning the historical figure into an emblem of genius, martyred by ignorance. Despite these embellishments, the core truth remains. Archimedes' legacy is one of towering intellect and enduring influence. His life encapsulates the best of human curiosity and the tragic consequences that sometimes befall even the most enlightened in turbulent times. Through the lens of time, Archimedes continues to inspire generations, not merely as a historical figure, but as a symbol of the unyielding quest to understand the universe. Ptolemy, a name intertwined with the grandeur of ancient knowledge and cosmic understanding, remains one of the most influential figures in the annals of science and astronomy. Living during the height of Roman Egypt, around 100 CE to approximately 170 CE, Claudius Ptolemaeus, more widely known simply as Ptolemaeus, behind a legacy that endured for over a millennium. While specific details about his birth and early upbringing are elusive, historians believe he lived and worked in the culturally rich city of Alexandria, a hub of learning and intellectual activity following the legacy of the Great Library. This environment of scholarly ambition allowed Ptolemy to explore disciplines as varied as astronomy, mathematics, geography, music, and optics. His reputation primarily rests on his astronomical work, particularly the Almagest, a colossal treatise that presented a comprehensive model of the heavens grounded in geometric calculation and meticulous observation. By developing a geocentric model of the universe, placing Earth at the center of celestial motion, he provided a framework that shaped astronomical thought across Europe, the Islamic world, and beyond, persisting until the Copernican revolution. Centuries later, the influence of Ptolemy's work was not limited to astronomy alone. He authored texts such as the Tetrabiblos, a detailed exposition on astrology that was regarded with reverence during medieval and Renaissance times. His treatise on geography introduced the concept of latitude and longitude in a systematic format, and included a map of the known world as he understood it. While his geographical assumptions were occasionally flawed due to limited exploration data, the conceptual advancement he initiated helped future explorers and cartographers refine their craft. Another contribution of his, the Harmonics, explored the mathematical principles of music, while his work on optics delved into the behavior of light and vision, demonstrating his diverse interests and analytical capabilities. Ptolemy approached his work with an air of methodical precision, employing mathematical modeling to describe natural phenomena and demonstrating a commitment to harmonizing theory with empirical data, even when limited by the tools of his era. Despite being deeply immersed in Greek intellectual traditions, Ptolemy wrote in Greek and carried a Roman name, reflecting the multicultural nature of Alexandria under Roman rule. His synthesis of Hellenistic thought with Roman structure exemplified the blend of cultures characteristic of his environment. This multicultural integration made his writings accessible and respected in varied regions of the ancient world. Through translations into Arabic during the Islamic Golden Age, His ideas permeated Middle Eastern scholarly traditions, influencing Islamic astronomers and mathematicians. Later, Latin translations ensured that his models continued to serve as the cornerstone of medieval European cosmology, as the philosophical underpinnings of the geocentric model resonated with prevailing theological and metaphysical ideologies of the time. His work was accepted not merely as scientific explanation but as a depiction of cosmic order. While the biographical details surrounding Ptolemy remain scarce, his intellectual fingerprint is unmistakably embedded in historical documentation. No contemporary records describe his appearance or personal character, and the lack of personal anecdotes in his writings leaves modern readers to infer his personality through his scholarship. However, the complexity and clarity of his work suggest a meticulous, patient, and profoundly inquisitive mind. He appeared less concerned with fame or personal acclaim, and more invested in constructing enduring frameworks of understanding. His writings lack overt appeals for recognition or polemics against contemporaries, indicating a scholar more interested in the purity of intellectual pursuit than in rivalry or self-promotion. As centuries passed, Ptolemy's image was perpetuated, not through statues or temples, but through the enduring pages of illuminated manuscripts. These elaborate, hand-decorated books often featured him as a wise figure surrounded by celestial instruments or astronomical diagrams. Medieval scribes and illustrators would depict him seated beneath the stars, compasses in hand, portraying an almost mystical connection between the heavens and the scholar. Such representations elevated his status to that of a sage or prophet, someone whose grasp of the cosmos approached divine insight. These manuscripts, often produced by monks or scholars during the medieval period, served as the primary medium through which his ideas were preserved and passed down. Gold leaf, rich pigments, and detailed marginalia adorned these pages, reflecting not only artistic devotion, but the reverence with which Ptolemy's work was treated. Frescoes and mural paintings from the Renaissance and later periods also immortalized Ptolemy's likeness. Artists inspired by the resurgence of classical learning would include his image among pantheons of great thinkers, often in settings devoted to the liberal arts or celestial studies. These frescoes would present him wearing robes of wisdom, a globe or armillary sphere by his side, signifying his association with the earth and the heavens. His presence in such compositions symbolized the enduring nature of classical knowledge and its importance in shaping intellectual history. Even in the absence of authentic portraits, these artistic interpretations conveyed a powerful sense of who Ptolemy was believed to be, a thinker who mapped the stars and charted the world through thought alone. The transition from the classical era into the age of scholasticism saw his doctrines gain renewed emphasis. His geocentric model remained the dominant cosmological paradigm for over 1400 years, a testament to the persuasive power of his synthesis. However, as scientific inquiry progressed, figures like Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler began to question and ultimately dismantled the Ptolemaic worldview. Despite the eventual displacement of his cosmology, Ptolemy's methods, logic, and mathematical rigor continued to be respected. The legacy of his systematic approach endured in the structure of modern scientific method, which values prediction, measurement, and refinement through observation. Regarding his death, records are again silent, offering no detailed account of his final years or the circumstances of his passing. It is widely believed that Ptolemy died around 170 CE in Alexandria, where he likely spent most of his life. The absence of drama or violence surrounding his death stands in contrast to many of his intellectual successors, who faced persecution or exile. Instead, his end appears to have been marked by the quiet continuation of study, a fitting conclusion for someone whose life was defined by steady, unwavering intellectual pursuit. His death did not spark political upheaval or social lament, yet the reverberations of his work continued to echo through every observatory, university, and library touched by his influence. The reverence for Ptolemy's legacy continues even into modern times. Scholars today revisit his texts with a dual lens, appreciating the historical context and evaluating the accuracy of his models against contemporary knowledge. While modern astronomy has moved far beyond geocentrism, there remains admiration for the ingenuity he exhibited within the limitations of his era. Digital reconstructions and scholarly projects now make his writings available to a global audience, ensuring that new generations can learn from both his insights and his limitations. Artistic renditions in digital media, textbooks, and documentaries perpetuate the visual narrative that began with illuminated manuscripts and frescoes. reinforcing his image as a timeless seeker of truth. In sum, Ptolemy occupies a unique place in the lineage of intellectual giants, not because he was infallible, but because he strove to explain the universe with the tools available to him, doing so with care, clarity, and commitment. His life was a quiet but powerful testament to the pursuit of knowledge, unmarred by political ambition or personal vanity. Through illuminated manuscripts that celebrated his contributions and frescoes that etched his image into cultural memory, Ptolemy became more than a historical figure. He became a symbol of enduring inquiry. His works serve not only as relics of a bygone cosmology, but also as milestones in humanity's journey to understand its place in the cosmos. As the stars he once tried to map continue their celestial dance, the legacy of Ptolemy remains fixed in the intellectual constellation of human history. Euclid, the revered mathematician of antiquity, often hailed as the father of geometry, stands as a pillar in the edifice of mathematical thought, whose influence has transcended centuries and civilizations. Though the specifics of his birth and upbringing are largely obscured by time, it is generally accepted that he lived during the reign of Ptolemy I in the early 3rd century BCE, primarily working in the intellectually vibrant city of Alexandria. This ancient hub of knowledge, flourishing with scholars, philosophers, and scientists, became the fertile ground where Euclid cultivated and codified geometric knowledge into a structured form that would shape the very fabric of mathematical education for over 2 millennia. His most famous work, The Elements, is an extensive compilation of definitions, postulates, propositions, and proofs that not only organized the mathematics known at the time, but also introduced a methodical approach to logical deduction that became a model for scientific reasoning. Euclid did not claim originality over every concept within the elements, but his unparalleled achievement lay in the clarity, order, and rigor with which he presented mathematical truths. His pedagogical method was rooted in logical progression, starting with simple axioms and building up to more complex theorems, a structure that has influenced countless mathematicians, educators, and thinkers from antiquity through the Enlightenment and beyond. The significance of the elements was such that it became a foundational text in educational systems across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, enduring well into the modern era. Its widespread adoption was facilitated by its clear structure and universal applicability, qualities that made it a standard not just in mathematical instruction, but also in philosophical and scientific training. Though Euclid also authored works on optics, music theory, and number theory, it is the elements that stands as his magnum opus, representing an intellectual triumph that few in history have rivaled. Very little is known about Euclid's personal life, and unlike many historical figures whose lives were chronicled by contemporaries or followers, Euclid's biography is almost entirely reconstructed from references made by later commentators. He is often depicted in anecdotes as a humble and diligent teacher, one who valued the discipline of learning and the pursuit of truth over personal fame or recognition. One popular story, though likely apocryphal, involves a student asking what benefit geometry would bring him, to which Euclid supposedly replied by ordering a servant to give the student a coin, saying he must profit from learning. This tale, while possibly fictional, encapsulates the image of Euclid as someone who regarded knowledge as inherently valuable, separate from material gain or superficial accolades. His intellectual pursuits flourished under the patronage of the Ptolemaic court, which encouraged scholarly activity and preserved knowledge through the famed Library of Alexandria. Euclid's ability to synthesize earlier works from mathematicians like Eudoxus and Theaetetus, while infusing them with his unique systematization, speaks to a deep respect for tradition coupled with a desire to refine and communicate complex ideas with precision. His meticulous attention to logical flow and his insistence on proof as the foundation of mathematical truth marked a turning point in the evolution of mathematics, one that emphasized discipline and clarity over conjecture or intuition. Despite the massive influence of his work, the circumstances surrounding Euclid's death remain as enigmatic as his early life. There are no surviving records detailing how or when he died, but given the lack of any dramatic accounts or mentions of persecution, it is widely presumed that he passed away peacefully in Alexandria, likely continuing his scholarly pursuits until his final days. His death, though unmarked by monument or headline, did nothing to diminish the longevity of his contributions. The mathematical system he left behind would continue to educate, inspire, and challenge minds across continents and epochs, centuries after his time. As Europe entered the Middle Ages and later the Renaissance, Euclid's reputation only grew in stature. Illuminated manuscripts of the elements emerged in various languages, bearing intricate decorations and marginalia that underscored the reverence with which scholars viewed his work. These medieval copies were not merely tools for instruction, they were treasured artifacts of intellectual heritage. In monasteries and universities alike, students pored over Euclid's geometric constructions, using compasses and straightedges to replicate his diagrams and internalize the elegance of his logic. His influence was not limited to mathematicians alone. Philosophers and theologians found in his method a template for structured argumentation and proof, applying similar rigor to fields far removed from geometry. As the Renaissance reignited interest in classical antiquity, Euclid's legacy was enshrined not only in academic curricula but also in the visual arts. Renaissance painters and sculptors, captivated by the rebirth of reason and proportion, often included depictions of Euclid or scenes alluding to geometric instruction within larger works, celebrating knowledge. In Raphael's famous fresco, The School of Athens, a figure traditionally identified as Euclid is shown bending over a slate, demonstrating geometric principles to attentive students. This portrayal encapsulates the centrality of mathematics in the human quest for understanding, positioning Euclid alongside Plato, Aristotle, and other luminaries of ancient thought. Art from this period often symbolized Euclid as a figure of balance, intellect, and order. These representations typically portrayed him with tools of geometry, compasses, scrolls, or diagrams, emphasizing his association with precision and structured thinking. In some cases, artists blurred the lines between Euclid and Archimedes or other ancient scientists, reflecting the conflation of scientific icons during times when detailed biographical knowledge was limited. Nonetheless, the enduring iconography made it clear that Euclid's name was synonymous with geometric clarity and the pursuit of intellectual harmony. Through these artistic expressions, Euclid's image was preserved not only as a scholar, but as a symbol of mathematical purity and rational thought, embodying ideals that defined the intellectual spirit of both medieval and Renaissance Europe. In addition to paintings, woodcuts and engravings from early printed editions of the Elements brought visual representations of Euclid into the hands of a wider audience. These artworks often illustrated him as an elderly man with a long beard, deeply engrossed in his studies, his hands guiding instruments over geometric figures with an air of timeless focus. Such imagery contributed to the creation of an wise, devoted mathematician whose life revolved around the pursuit of order within the cosmos. This archetype would influence generations of thinkers and artists who saw in Euclid not just a historical figure, but an ideal to emulate. The publication of Euclid's works in print during the age of movable type further cemented his place in intellectual history. Editions of the Elements, complete with elaborate frontispieces and detailed illustrations, became prized possessions in the libraries of scholars, nobles, and monarchs. These volumes often bore dedications to patrons who saw in Euclid's work the convergence of mathematical beauty and philosophical depth. The popularity of these printed texts speaks not only to the enduring relevance of Euclidean geometry but also to the aesthetic and symbolic weight it carried in a society rediscovering the value of classical learning. Even in modern times, Euclid's presence remains deeply embedded in the foundation of education, engineering, and theoretical science. His axiomatic approach has influenced not just the structure of mathematics, but the framework through which logic and reason are applied in multiple domains. Courses in geometry still begin with his principles, and his method remains a model of pedagogical clarity. The timeless quality of his work continues to find echoes in contemporary mathematics, where his definitions and postulates are introduced as the starting point of a grand and unending exploration. Thus, Euclid's life, though sparsely documented, resonates through the ages, not through biography or monument, but through the legacy of thought and structure he bequeathed to the world. His quiet dedication, unadorned by political ambition or public acclaim, created a path of understanding that countless minds have walked upon, from ancient scholars to modern scientists, medieval scribes who adorned his texts with gold and ink, and Renaissance artists who cast him among the immortals of knowledge. All contributed to the enduring image of a man devoted wholly to the pursuit of clarity, reason, and truth. Though the details of his life and death may remain shrouded in history's mists, Euclid's spirit endures in every measured line, every theorem proved, and every question approached with structured logic and unwavering curiosity.
Avicenna Ibn Sina. Avicenna, known in the Islamic world as Ibn Sina, occupies a unique and enduring place in the chronicles of intellectual history, revered as a polymath whose genius spanned medicine, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and numerous other fields. Born in 980 CE in the village of Afshana, near Bukhara, in present-day Uzbekistan, he grew up in a culturally vibrant Persian environment where scholarship and inquiry were highly esteemed. His father, a respected local official, ensured that the young Ibn Sina was immersed in a rich educational atmosphere. By the time he reached his teenage years, Avicenna had already mastered various disciplines, displaying an insatiable appetite for learning and an exceptional capacity to absorb and synthesize complex material. At the age of 16, he turned his attention to medicine, and within a few short years earned a reputation as a gifted healer, offering remedies and treatments that attracted attention far beyond his native region. His rise to prominence was rapid, propelled not only by his medical prowess but also by his philosophical insights, which drew heavily from Greek thinkers such as Aristotle and Galen, while infusing them with unique interpretations and original thought. One of his most celebrated accomplishments was the composition of the Canon of Medicine, a 5-volume medical encyclopedia that remained a standard text in both the Islamic world and Europe for centuries. The canon meticulously categorized diseases, treatments, surgical procedures, and pharmacological substances with a clarity and precision that left a profound impact on medical education. His contributions to philosophy were equally groundbreaking, especially his exploration of metaphysics and the nature of being, as articulated in his monumental work, The Book of Healing. Here, he developed theories that intertwined logic, theology, and science, establishing him as one of the foremost thinkers of the Islamic Golden Age. In addition to his scholarly accomplishments, Avicenna's life was marked by periods of political turbulence and personal hardship. His intellectual prowess often brought him into the service of various regional rulers, acting as physician, advisor, and administrator. These appointments, while prestigious, also exposed him to the volatility of court politics and the dangers of factional rivalry. At times, his rising influence provoked suspicion or jealousy, leading to periods of imprisonment or flight. Nevertheless, he continued to write prolifically, often composing treatises while on the move or during confinement. Despite the instability that occasionally marked his circumstances, he maintained a disciplined routine of study, debate, and writing, driven by an unwavering commitment to intellectual growth and discovery. Though a deeply spiritual man, Avicenna approached religious and metaphysical questions through the lens of logic and reason. He believed that understanding the natural world was a path toward comprehending higher truths, a view that placed him at the intersection of rational philosophy and spiritual inquiry. This synthesis of thought not only influenced Islamic theology, but also resonated with Christian and Jewish scholars during the Middle Ages, who translated his works into Latin and Hebrew, thereby integrating his ideas into the broader fabric of Western philosophical tradition. Figures such as Thomas Aquinas engaged extensively with Avicenna's concepts, particularly those dealing with existence, causality, and the human soul, acknowledging the depth and rigor of his reasoning. The circumstances of Avicenna's death reflect the toll that a lifetime of tireless work, travel, and political entanglement took on his health. While accompanying a military expedition under the employ of a local prince, he fell gravely ill with colic, a condition that became increasingly severe. Determined to heal himself, he applied his own medical treatments but eventually succumbed to his illness in 1037 CE in the city of Hamadan in modern-day Iran. He was buried there, and his tomb became a site of homage for admirers of his work, a symbol of a life lived in pursuit of understanding and the advancement of knowledge. His passing marked the end of an extraordinary era of scholarly production, yet the impact of his ideas continued to reverberate for centuries after his death. Visual representations of Avicenna, especially in Persian miniature art, reflect the high esteem in which he was held by generations that followed. Persian miniatures, known for their intricate detail and vibrant colors, often depict him seated cross-legged among students or deeply engaged in reading and writing, surrounded by books and instruments of learning. These images, though stylized and symbolic, capture the essence of a thinker immersed in contemplation and pedagogy. The use of fine lines, delicate brushwork, and richly decorated garments in these miniatures underscores the reverence and admiration for intellectual pursuits. In Persian culture, these artworks, frequently embedded within illuminated manuscripts of his writings or biographies, helped preserve and propagate his legacy throughout the Islamic world. In modern times, Avicenna has been immortalized not only in academic texts but also in museum collections and public monuments. Busts of him, crafted in marble, bronze, and other materials, are prominently displayed in institutions dedicated to science, philosophy, and the history of medicine. These sculptures typically portray him with a contemplative expression, wearing traditional Persian scholars' robes and a turban, evoking the solemn dignity of a man whose thoughts reshaped entire fields of inquiry. Museums in Iran, Uzbekistan, and other regions with historical ties to his life and work often feature exhibits dedicated to his manuscripts, personal instruments, and interpretations of his scientific achievements. These commemorations serve as enduring reminders of the intellectual heights that human inquiry can attain. Across universities and academic institutions worldwide, Avicenna's name is often invoked to symbolize excellence in learning and the integration of multiple disciplines. Lecture halls, research centers, and hospitals bear his name, reflecting the lasting influence of his medical innovations and philosophical systems. His approach to scientific investigation, which combined empirical observation with theoretical rigor, laid the groundwork for methodologies still in use today. His emphasis on logic and clarity of argumentation contributed significantly to the development of scientific discourse and philosophical debate, encouraging a tradition of critical thinking that remains vital in contemporary education. Even in popular culture and literature, Avicenna's figure continues to appear as a paragon of wisdom and intellectual depth. Writers, filmmakers, and dramatists have drawn inspiration from his life, exploring themes of knowledge, exile, and resilience. These portrayals often highlight the universal nature of his quest, showing how his dedication to reason and learning transcends cultural and temporal boundaries. By presenting him as a character driven by curiosity and compassion, modern interpretations keep his spirit alive and accessible to new generations. In conclusion, Avicenna's life stands as a testament to the enduring power of knowledge, inquiry, and perseverance. From his early mastery of sciences and philosophy to his expansive contributions that shaped the course of medicine and metaphysical thought, he remains a beacon of intellectual achievement. Through the delicate brushstrokes of Persian miniatures and the solemn lines of museum busts, his image continues to inspire awe and admiration. Though the world in which he lived has long since vanished, the clarity and scope of his ideas ensured that his presence endures not merely in texts and artworks, but in the very principles that guide the search for truth. His journey from a village in Persia to the heights of universal recognition reflects a timeless narrative of how a singular mind can illuminate the path for generations to come. Hypatia of Alexandria. Hypatia of Alexandria stands as a poignant symbol of knowledge, intellect, and the perilous crossroads between enlightenment and extremism. Born in the latter half of the 4th century CE, most likely around 360 CE, she was raised in the vibrant cultural and academic milieu of Alexandria, Egypt, a city that housed the famed library and museum and was renowned as a beacon of classical learning. Hypatia was the daughter of Theon, a respected mathematician and philosopher, who played a pivotal role in her early education. Under his guidance, she absorbed the intricacies of mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy, developing a formidable intellect that would soon surpass that of many of her contemporaries. She quickly became a central figure in Alexandria's intellectual circles, teaching publicly and attracting students from diverse backgrounds who sought her insight into the Neoplatonist school of thought, which emphasized the pursuit of truth through reason and contemplation. As she matured, Hypatia became an authority in a wide range of disciplines, excelling in areas traditionally dominated by men in her era. Her reputation as a scholar spread widely, with accounts describing her as eloquent, poised, and deeply committed to her philosophical beliefs. Her teachings included the works of Plato and Aristotle, and she often engaged in discussions that intertwined mathematics with metaphysics. She was not just a theoretician but also contributed to the development and preservation of key mathematical texts, including refinements to the work of Apollonius and commentaries on Diophantus's arithmetic treatises. Although much of her original work has not survived the passage of time, the respect with which her students and later writers spoke of her suggests that her influence was profound and enduring. Hypatia's presence in Alexandria was not confined to academic halls. She participated in civic life and held a prominent position as a public intellectual, one of the few women of antiquity to be so recognized. She was sought for counsel by political leaders, including Orestes, the Roman governor of Egypt, and was seen as a stabilizing figure during a period of intense political and religious upheaval. The city during Hypatia's lifetime was marked by violent confrontations between pagan, Christian, and Jewish communities, as theological disputes and power struggles redefined Alexandria's identity. Hypatia's philosophical neutrality and allegiance to classical learning made her a respected but also vulnerable figure in this polarized environment. Though she did not take sides, her association with certain civic leaders and her prominence in philosophical circles made her a target in the growing climate of suspicion and fanaticism. The manner of Hypatia's death is among the most tragic and brutal in the history of intellectual figures. In 415 CE, she was attacked by a mob, allegedly incited by a faction of Christian zealots who viewed her as a threat to their authority and doctrines. Dragged from her chariot into a church, she was savagely beaten and ultimately killed, her body desecrated and burned. This horrific act was not merely a personal attack, but a symbolic destruction of classical knowledge, reason, and the freedom to think outside prevailing orthodoxies. Her murder marked the decline of the Alexandrian intellectual tradition and was later lamented by historians as a dark turning point in the cultural history of the ancient world. Though she lived in a time of uncertainty, she carried forward the torch of reason until her violent end extinguished not only a life but also an era. Despite the attempts to erase her legacy, Hypatia's story survived, immortalized through the writings of her students, historians, and later generations who saw in her a martyr for knowledge. Over the centuries, she has been the subject of profound admiration and artistic reinterpretation, her image reconstructed to embody different ideals depending on the context of the age. In the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods, she was hailed as a symbol of rationalism and female intellectual empowerment. Artists, writers, and thinkers turned to her life as a means to reflect on the consequences of suppressing knowledge and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of ignorance. Hypatia became an emblem not just of ancient scholarship but of modern struggles for truth, reason, and gender equality. Artistic reimaginings of Hypatia have flourished in both classical and contemporary styles. Painters have depicted her in robes of white or deep blue, often with scrolls, compasses, or celestial globes in hand, standing before libraries or temples, her gaze reflective and serene. These images frequently portray her surrounded by students or confronting a hostile crowd, emphasizing her role as a courageous voice of reason in turbulent times. In modern cinema and literature, Hypatia is presented as a complex figure, both a scholar and a symbol of resistance. Directors and authors have woven her story into narratives that blend historical detail with philosophical meditation, expanding her reach far beyond academic circles. Sculptural tributes to Hypatia have also proliferated in museums and public spaces, where she is honored alongside other great thinkers of the ancient world. Her statues typically show a calm, composed woman with an air of introspective dignity, conveying both the gravity of her intellect and the serenity of her philosophical outlook. Bronze and marble renditions across Europe and the Middle East pay homage to her legacy, often situated in university campuses or libraries as a reminder of the eternal value of wisdom and inquiry. These artistic memorials bridge past and present, ensuring that her contributions and sacrifices are not forgotten. In the march of time beyond visual art, Hypatia's influence resonates in academic discourse, feminist thought, and secular philosophy. Scholars reference her as a pioneer who challenged societal norms through sheer intellectual merit, while advocates of education cite her life as a compelling argument for the protection of academic freedom. Conferences, journals, and educational institutions bearing her name strive to keep alive the ideals she represented: rigor, clarity, courage, and a steadfast commitment to truth. Her story inspires continued dialogue about the role of women in science and philosophy, reminding the world of how far society has come and how much further it must go to ensure that all voices can contribute freely to the collective search for understanding. Despite the centuries that separate us from her life, Hypatia remains a vital figure, not merely remembered but continuously reimagined. her legacy woven into the cultural and intellectual fabric of many traditions. Her enduring appeal lies in her embodiment of timeless values: rationality in the face of ignorance, dignity in the face of violence, and wisdom in the face of chaos. The art and statues that commemorate her serve as more than tributes. They are affirmations of the belief that knowledge, though vulnerable to attack, remains a light that can never be wholly extinguished. Hypatia of Alexandria, through her life, teachings, and tragic end, has become not just a chapter in history but a symbol for all ages, a beacon for those who cherish the power of reason, the beauty of learning, and the courage to stand alone in defense of truth.